LIB 104, Introduction to Library Technical Services, Week 6, Acquisitions and Vendors. LIB 104, Introduction to Library Technical Services, Week 6, Acquisitions and Vendors. Hi everyone. I hope you are all doing well. This week we will be looking at vendors, and there will be quite a few objectives that will be introduced. You will be continuing to distinguish between some of the areas in technical services, as we will be looking at some services from vendors that address the various areas in technical services. We will be exploring where we order materials from and begin thinking about the steps of ordering materials and receiving materials. And then also what issues may be present when libraries begin to outsource services that traditionally occurred within libraries. In acquisitions, there are broad goals. We want to acquire materials quickly, but as we do that, we want to make sure that our process remains accurate, so that when we acquire materials, they are of high quality and aligned to the needs of our community members. Although this could lead to complicated workflows, we do want to try and keep those workflows as simple and as efficient as possible, which ultimately assists in getting materials into the library faster. Finally, acquisitions should be developing and maintaining relationships with vendors, as well as the other library units. A method to achieve these goals is to utilize outsourcing. Outsourcing certain processes helps make the library's workflows much more efficient. Common examples in technical services include shelf-ready books, which are when books are ordered through a vendor. The vendor sends you the books to the library that's already processed according to the library's chosen standards. So the books are available with library barcodes and library call number labels, security features, they're already stamped and covered, everything that's needed, so that when the library receives the material, it can almost go directly on the shelf. Libraries may outsource inventory services, where an outside company can run book reports on their materials and let the library know what gaps in the collection there are. Cataloging service is something vendors are able to support as well, as they often will send libraries catalog records of the materials they've purchased, so that libraries just have to upload them into their catalogs. Other services that we may see that are outsourced include cleaning services, hiring services, maybe an agency is used to find suitable employees, and even virtual reference is sometimes staffed by library members and other libraries or even organizations altogether. Of course, outsourcing comes with advantages and disadvantages. Positively, outsourcing can reduce and control costs for the library. So initially, it may feel more expensive, but you make it up in the long run. Outsourcing can make it so libraries can focus on other activities in realizing their priorities. However, because they're no longer performing the services themselves, libraries may lack control over the service and loyalty of the staff that is outsourced. With outsourcing, libraries may welcome in new expertise into their institutions, but they may also suffer from institutional memory loss. Libraries can gain access to specialized equipment, but with new equipment comes increased training and perhaps loss of staff. Finally, with outsourcing, libraries may be able to experiment with services with little risk to their own core functions, but they have to balance that Balance it out with any confidentiality or maybe privacy risks when sharing information with outside companies. We need to be able to order materials effectively and efficiently. When we look at all the different acquisition methods, we're talking about how libraries do their shopping. And it's pretty much like how we do our shopping at home, but some technical names are attached to the methods. The first one is the most direct method, known as a firm order. A firm order is when a library places an order for an item as needed. It's the same approach as going to Amazon and selecting items to purchase on the spot. That's a firm order. Another method is called a standing order. When you have items that you order over and over again, instead of ordering them each time, you simply set up an automatic shipment for those items. Libraries do this so they don't have to remember or track when a new volume or edition of a book comes out. If they know they want the latest edition of a specific title every year, they place a standing order. Approval plans are like standing orders, except in an approval plan, the library says to the vendor, "Send us the titles to review, but if we don't like them, we won't purchase them all." We don't have the time to select and review all the titles ahead of time, so the risk with approval plans is that you often have a limited time to review the materials, and if you forget to send them back, you have to pay for them. A blanket order, sort of like a standing order as well, but you're not buying a specific title. You're simply letting the vendor know you will purchase everything under a specific subject or area without selecting individual titles, and leaving it to the vendor. Another acquisition area is subscriptions. Libraries tend to hold many subscriptions. Subscriptions means that libraries have committed to an annual or maybe semi-annual or 3 years, any other set length of time for payment for access to a resource. Related to subscriptions are leases, but with leases, you pay for something without owning it. So with magazines, the library owns the issues that have been sent to them. With a lease, libraries lose access to materials that have been sent to them. Some vendors offer book leases to libraries, databases, although often described as subscriptions, are more like leases in that when a library ends its subscription to a database, they lose access to the resources as well. Library equipment is sometimes leased instead of purchased. Then we have gifts or donations, which are a bit different as these tend to come from community members. And sometimes libraries receive unsolicited gifts from publishers. Finally, some exchanges occur between libraries. One library may need to get rid of materials and offer it to another library freely or for a small fee in exchange for something else. Library vendors span a wide range of categories. Profit, not-for-profit. They focus on services such as cataloging, or maybe focus on supplies and materials such as barcodes or furniture, or they could even focus on resources such as books or films on a certain subject. They may cater to the arts or may cater to medicine or school libraries. It just depends. Then there are those that are broad in scope, meaning they provide a bit of everything listed so far. When determining what vendor to work with, a library should question what's in stock. That's probably the most obvious factor as it relates to what they provide and whether that aligns with what the library needs. One should also consider the vendor's technology capabilities and capacity. Are they able to work with the library systems the library has? And can the library work with the systems the vendor is providing? If it can be discovered, the delivery of their services should be considered and noted. How long does it take to receive materials? How are their services supplied and supported? Do they offer discounts? What's their pricing structure based on? Sometimes with academic institutions, vendors look at the student enrollment of the college to figure out a cost to their service. The more students, the higher the cost. Other vendors offer discounts to libraries if they're tax-exempt institutions. Also, consider what are the range of services that they provide. Can you and do you want to do one-stop shopping with this vendor? Are they able to assist with other needs the library may have? Finally, another consideration could be what's their customer support like? This could be related to their delivery of service, but a bit more specific as you will need to gauge and determine how you can get assistance with their services when needed. Library vendors are great, but they're not the only organizations that libraries work with. Libraries can work with their local bookstores, whether it's an independent bookstore or a larger organization such as Barnes and Noble. Establishing relationships with the bookstore can be really beneficial. For supplies, you might be shopping at Office Depot and Staples, and oftentimes their labels work just as well for barcodes and call numbers. Amazon is another entity that can be used by libraries. But Amazon and other online retailers don't make it easy for libraries to work with them. One thing to be aware of is questioning whether or not the entity accepts your institution's method of payment. Amazon doesn't accept purchase orders, or you may find working with retail organizations is much easier for certain purchases. At a lot of libraries, the purchase order system is used. So an Amazon order is not an entity we could work with. I've worked at other institutions where we've had institutional cards or a credit card to support online acquisitions. And I've also worked at places where we could be reimbursed easily for items that we've purchased out of pocket for the library as well. So if you're involved with purchasing, knowing what your method of payment is pretty important, not just for working with retail outlets, but for also with a chosen vendor.
Another specialty that we have in libraries are out-of-print suppliers, or rare book vendors. When we get into this world, we are often working with used books, as they are no longer being printed. Within the used book market, there are different models that vendors use. One is called a complete book service. This is when the bookstore or jobber will look for a title you want. They do not have anything in stock, but they will try to locate titles for you upon request. In contrast to that, are complete sales service. These vendors collect used books and sell them, but they do not look for specific titles on your behalf. What they keep in stock is what you have access to. Finally, you have the complete bookstore, which has titles in stock and also will look for titles for you. They may also accept your used books from you. And finally, how do we know what vendors are offering us? through their catalogs and websites. So with print catalogs, which you can also access on their websites, you will see that vendors have their products organized just like a store would have their catalogs organized. They're easy to flip through and make notes and share amongst colleagues. On websites, you might need an account to actually use their services. They're not always open to the public to just browse. You also might need to know exactly what you're looking for, as browsing through a website is not always intuitive, and you might actually miss out on items if they don't have suggested items lining up next to the resource you're looking at. However, they may have organized lists that make searching a lot easier.
This week, you'll be doing some shopping for your libraries. One activity will have you exploring the different vendors that focus on library supplies. You have a shopping list you need to adhere to and a budget, so explore the sites and do your best to stay under budget. The second activity has you visiting some library book vendors. These vendors were selected because their sites don't require you to create an account to access their pricing and titles. You don't have to use all of them, but you should explore their sites and see what they offer and how they're organized. There's no reading this week, but there's some additional videos to watch that your weekly quiz will be based on. Have a terrific week.